You're listening to the Marriage Clinic Podcast, a podcast on love, marriage, and personal development. Our purpose is to inspire and equip you with knowledge and skills to enable you to have lasting and fulfilling relationships. Now, your host, Joshua Mogre.
Hello and welcome again. This is the Marriage Clinic Podcast. It's a podcast on love, marriage, and your personal development. And once again, it is me here, your regular host, all the way from Ghana, West Africa. It is me, Dr. Joshua Mogre, as I bring to you something fresh this week that I'm sure you would love. So please put a hello in the comments right now and also let me know where you're watching from. So tell me the time of where you're watching from, and then also tell me the country and the city you're watching from, and we would love to interact. Today's topic is one like no other. One like no other. I nearly said guess what the topic is, but you probably would not be able to guess what the topic is. So I'll tell you anyway. Today's topic is interesting, and I call it the ghost of relationships past. Ghost of relationships past. Basically, I'm going to be talking to you in the next 3 episodes about how to deal with your past relationships now that you're married. I hear people ask all the time, they say, is the Marriage Clinic Podcast for single people or the Marriage Clinic Podcast is for married people? The truth is that the Marriage Clinic Podcast is for both, because I keep going between subjects that are very important or speak directly to single people, and I talk about it in such a way that married people are able to see where they made mistakes when they were single. And when I talk about married problems or married issues, it allows people who are not yet married to prepare themselves in such a way that they are ready for marriage when they do get there. So, the Marriage Clinic Podcast is for single people, it's for married people, it's for divorced people, it's for people who may not even want to get married, but we all encounter married people and married situations, and you will need it. So today we're starting a new series on the ghost of relationship past, how to deal with your exes after you are married. And please tell a friend as we gather around to listen to what we are discussing today. All right. Let me just jump right into it. You see, it's important to recognize that the experiences you had with other people in relationships, both good and bad, affect how your current marriage is going to go. We are products of our experiences. So if you had a very good relationship that did not work out into marriage and then you ended up marrying someone new, the experiences you bring from that good relationship, probably the person passed away or probably for various reasons you couldn't get married and now you are married, you bring those experiences to bear in your new marriage. So let me just read this for you. In the same way, the experience of past relationships come a long way to affecting current marriages. It is not uncommon to find that many of the ways people behave and react in marriage can be traced back to experiences with an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. So you need to realize that the way you accept love, the way you think about love, the level of trust you have for your husband or your wife has been affected by the relationship you had before you got married. So it's important that we look at it. Now, for most people, there's either a yearning for their ex. Most people, not all people. There's either a yearning for their ex, as in, I miss him or I miss her. I wish I had married him or I had married her. And then there's also the other scenario where all of a sudden, there is a disdain for your ex. I hate him. I hate her. This is the worst thing that ever happened to me. I wish I had my way. I just pray you are not trying to kill your ex. but most people have one or two of these experiences. And for people who had multiple relationships before they got married, you will realize that it is a whole mixture of all of these things. So today I'm going to talk to you in this episode about the kinds of attachments you will have to your ex, the kinds of attachments that we see you having to your ex, and then in subsequent ones I'm going to talk about how to deal with these problems. So as I said earlier, this is the Marriage Clinic podcast. Please share this wherever you are listening to it. If you're listening to it on the socials or watching it on the socials, please share it. Please send the link to a friend who will send it to a friend. Because in the long run, all we want to do is see more people affected and relationships get better. I'm extremely passionate about relationships and us getting the marriage puzzle done well. So the first kind of attachment is the physical attachment. The first kind of attachment you can have to your ex, even though you are married, is the physical attachment. Put that in the chat. Physical attachment. This is funny. It is a funny form of attachment when one feels an unhealthy need to physically be around their ex. So you may be married to whoever your wife is now, but you just always feel like seeing your ex. You feel like being around the person. For instance, you may be meeting your ex from time to time for lunch. You may be visiting them even though you are still married. Even though you claim it's over, you still find yourself going to your ex from time. Sometimes she drives by your office, she just pops up in your office. She's so used to coming to your office. Even though you're broken up and you're married now, she still pops up in your office from time to time and she's just there to say hello. So, and the moment you find yourself not telling your husband or your wife that you saw your ex, then there's a problem. Well, you may be saying, so Josh, are you saying that it's not possible for me to still be friends with my ex? I don't advise you remain friends with your ex. You may be acquaintances with your ex. But anytime you have a meeting with your ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend, and you find it hard to tell the person you are married to that I was with Jennifer today, or I was with Michael today, or I had lunch with Michael, the moment you find it very hard to mention it to your spouse, that means in your subconscious, you know you are doing something you shouldn't be doing. And remember, a lie of omission is still a lie. I hear people say, oh, but they didn't ask me about it, so that's why I didn't say it. You know that a lie of omission is still a lie. So that's the first kind of attachment. The second kind of attachment we have is the emotional attachment. So the first one is the physical, where you always want to see the person. And the next one is the emotional attachment. Emotional attachments they are a strange one. You can be emotionally attached to an ex you haven't seen or heard from in years. You can be emotionally attached to an ex you haven't seen or heard from in years. And it still goes to affect your marriage. How does it affect your marriage? It may be an attachment of love, where you still have a crush, you still carry a torch for the person that you have broken up with. So you still have strong feelings of love. You still find yourself wishing that you hadn't broke up with the person. You find yourself always thinking of the person from time to time, even though you are not seeing the person. I was once dealing with a situation where with someone who was single, who told me how her ex-boyfriend would always call her up and tell her, baby, I still love you. I may be married. The biggest mistake I made was getting married to this person, and if you would just tell me there's hope for us, I'm willing to break up the marriage I am in and come back to you, simply because the person still has a strong emotion of love. a strong emotion of love. Now, this is very common, especially with couples who are facing the shocks of the first few months of marriage or the first year of marriage. Let me backtrack and explain something. The first year of marriage for most couples, not all couples, the first year of marriage for most couples is one of the most difficult. The first year of marriage can be one of the most difficult seasons because you are learning to love each other. You are learning to live with somebody that you didn't live with all your life, and you are trying to find a way out. You need to understand that in that first year of marriage, there is the temptation to always fantasize about an ex that you loved, an ex that treated you nicely, especially when the way you want to be loved, the person you are married to is now not treating you in that same way. So it's important to realize that when it comes to emotional attachment, it may be an attachment of love. But then there's also the flip side. The yin may be love and the yang, yin and yang, and the yang may be hate. I also know people who are married, this person loves them, but they can't get over the hurt, the emotional hurt that their ex caused them. And from time to time, anytime it comes to mind, they are extremely angry. It affects their emotions. One couple I was dealing with, the man was saying that even when someone appears on TV and has the name, just the first name of her ex, she gets upset. So sometimes it's love and sometimes it's hate. Whatever thing it is, if you are still having that emotional attachment to your ex, it's going to affect how you live in your marriage, how you love your spouse, and how you continue to move. So I said number one is a physical attachment. Number two is emotional attachment. And emotional attachments to your ex while you are married manifests itself in love and manifests itself in resentment or anger. So that is, those are the first two. Brings us to number three. Number three is an interesting one. That is, I like to call it relational attachment. Relational attachment. This is a challenge that shows up normally when you date in a small town. This form of attachment is when you and your ex still interact often because you are still in the same small group, you are still in the same church, you still work in the same office. So in this situation, you've broken up with the person, you are married to someone else, but on a daily basis, or a weekly basis, you still have to interact with the person that you have broken up with because you find yourself in the same relational situation. So sometimes, I know some people who date in church and the relationship doesn't work out, and if, let's say for instance, is the man now goes to marry a different lady and she joins the church. So he is still in the church, his ex is in the church, and his wife is in the church. Or where some people experiment with office romantic situations where you dated someone in the office, it didn't work out, and now you're married, but on a daily basis you still have to interact with the person that you said you didn't want to see any longer. So here there's a relational attachment, but it is forced on you because of your situation. So that's the third kind of attachment that we see. The fourth kind of attachment that we have, and we see people have even though they are married, is what we call the sexual attachment. If you could look for some of, I think within the first 3 or 4 podcasts, I did a series on sex and why sex is not casual. You can go look at that, go listen to it. And why I advise couples that when you are not married, don't have sex. Don't sleep with someone you are not married to. I know you may think it's outdated. I know you may think that it really doesn't matter in today's times, but it does matter. We need to remember all the time that sex, you never really walk away from someone you sleep with. So what tends to happen is that when you have broken up with a person and you haven't gone through the right kind of therapy both spiritual and psychological therapy to get over your sexual link with the person, you still find yourself attached to this person for sexual reasons. Now, let me quickly read something from 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 16. It says, there's more to sex than mere skin on skin. Sex is a much spiritual mystery as a physical fact. So you need to remember that sometimes the sex you had with your ex impacts the sex and the relationship you're having with your current spouse. There was a sad situation where a lady was talking and she said, whenever she's being intimate with her husband, unless for her to be able to reach orgasm, she has to imagine her ex. So she says sometimes she has to transpose the face of her ex onto her current husband. There are people who cannot put themselves in certain sexual positions because those sexual positions remind them of their relationships with their ex, and these issues have not been dealt with. Sex keeps you linked. Sex reminds you. You can forget, I say this all the time, you can forget someone easily if it was just a friendship. You can forget it when a thief robbed you. But it is nearly impossible to forget a sexual encounter you had with someone. And that also creates an attachment even after you're married. So if you are out there and you're not sexually active, please, I'm giving you another reason why you shouldn't become sexually active before you get married, because there's so much you have to unlearn and unpack while you're married, and it doesn't help. So number 4 is sexual attachment. This is the Marriage Clinic podcast. As I keep reminding, it's a podcast on love. It's a podcast on marriage. It is a podcast on your personal development. And as you know, my name is Dr. Joshua Mogre. And please, let's keep interacting on this. Now, I'm going to give you the last 2, probably, with the time that we have. The next one is the spiritual attachment. The spiritual attachment. When you are in love, we do crazy things. Okay? I know people who have done crazy things. Now, I'm a person of faith. I am a person of faith. In Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21, it says that life and death lie in the power of the tongue. I believe, and science has also proved, that things you say cause a ripple effect that eventually affect your life. Now, sometimes when we are in love, people begin to say very crazy things. They say things like, if I ever break up with you, it should never be well with me. We hear guys who sometimes when they are trying to convince a lady to sleep with them, they promise the lady, they say, listen, if after sleeping with you, and sometimes maybe it's the lady's first sexual encounter, they say, I know sex is so important, and if I sleep with you and I leave you, let it affect my children. And things that you say have spiritual implications. So those things from the ex have an influence. And then there's also the crazy side. Let me tell you a funny story. A couple of years ago, this is long ago, when my driving instructor was telling me about he and his, she was his ex at that point in time. And he said, it's very difficult to forget about her because when we were in love, we were walking on the beach one time and she said we should have a blood covenant. So he said, I slit my wrist, she slit her wrist, we mixed our blood together, and then we rinsed our hands in the sea, and we said we would be bonded to each other forever. If you're not a person of faith, you may not believe this, but as people of faith, we know that in doing that, you've initiated a covenant, and it makes it so difficult for you to be able to move on. You may be asking, Pastor Josh, if I have done this, what do I do? I have another, go on YouTube, I have prayers for singles. There's a component there that deals with covenants and spiritual links that may have been created through relationships. Or find a Bible-believing church, talk to the pastor, tell him what you've gone through, and then help him to be able to talk to him to pray with you and lead you to pray. And this should be able to help you overcome these challenges. So these are the 5 kinds of attachments that you can still have to your ex even after you're married. To give you a quick recap, number 1 is the physical attachment. That is when you still have an uncontrollable desire to meet the person that you have broken up with, even though you are married to someone else. The second one is emotional attachment. Emotional attachment manifests itself either in you still having a crush, love, fantasies about the person you are with, or having severe hate and resentment for your ex. Then we have the relational attachment. That is when, just by virtue of where you live, where you work, where you do life, you keep encountering your ex. Then number 4 is sexual attachment, where the sex you had with the person is still keeping you linked. And number 5 is spiritual attachment. So here we are. I hope this is giving you a bit of a diagnosis about if you still have attachment issues with your ex. And if you still have attachment issues with your ex, do not fret. Next week, when we meet once again, I'm going to be coming to you with why it is important to sever every relationship with your past ex. Why you need to make sure you stop interacting with your ex. So this is me, Dr. Joshua Mogre. I just brought you this week's edition of the Marriage Clinic podcast. We will always put up an episode every Thursday. We put up a new episode and then hope to see you again. So put your questions in the chat and I will gradually get to all your questions. God bless you. Take good care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of your week and see you next week. Bye-bye.